Hello, good afternoon. Just before we start our plenary, may we invite all of you to the third floor for the opening of our exhibits. There are projects or items for sale and for everybody's, if you want, we are inviting you for the opening of the exhibit at 2 o'clock. It's 5 minutes from now. So we hope to see you there at the third floor of the building. Thank you.
Good afternoon. The summit will resume in about 5 minutes. We'll ask everyone to settle down while we wait for the others to exhibit. We're going to start in 5 minutes. I'd like to ask everyone to settle down. Thank you.
Research has shown that all insurance products, health insurance is the most demanded by the poor. Public healthcare facilities often lack the capacity to provide an adequate standard of care. Although many people use private facilities, they often have to sell assets or take on debt in order to meet the cost of hospital care. This often has the greatest impact on women and children. An estimated 20 million people a year, or a quarter of those receiving healthcare, fall below the poverty line as a result of the high cost of medical expenses. MicroEnsure has developed comprehensive, low-cost health insurance which covers pre-existing illnesses and maternity care from day one. Service is provided on a cashless basis. Users simply present their ID card to receive treatment. MicroEnsure launched its first cashless health insurance product in India in 2008. Remarkably, it costs as little as $9 a year to provide health insurance cover for a family of 4.
I had severe pain in my stomach. I was admitted to the hospital and got treated in 24 hours. I had an operation to remove an ulcer in my gallbladder. I was worried about the cost because of my poor economic condition, but I am thankful as I received cashless treatment and did not have to pay.
In Tanzania, MicroEnsure have recently launched a number of health insurance programs which are sold through the Anglican Church and the coffee growers' unions. Selling in this way has helped to overcome people's mistrust of traditional insurance companies. As MicroEnsure continue to expand, they are working to provide health insurance in a number of other countries using a variety of distribution channels.
Welcome back, all of you. Did you enjoy your lunch? Someone said no. In the morning, we heard from Professor Eunice, from Jim Kim, from clients, and from others, encouraging us to look at how we can be part of a movement to end severe poverty. He said if we can meet the Millennium Development Goals in 2015, then we can push forward to the ultimate goal of ending severe poverty by 2030. And this summit is focused around the question, how can we be a part of that movement? What can microfinance organizations and what can other development organizations do together to help clients address the multiple struggles that they face, the impediments that may keep them in poverty, that may trap them as they struggle to move out, as they begin to try to summit the great mountain out of poverty. And as we thought about the theme about partnerships, we thought it would be good to think about how do you do a good partnership? What do good partnerships look like? How do you organize a partnership in a way that both contribute and both are sustained and the work is more than either one of them could do on their own? And so we brought in an expert on partnerships to talk to us about how to do partnerships. This is Luff. Nicholas is an accomplished sustainable development and performance strategist with over 20 years of experience in business, government, and civil society. He's an accredited multi-sector partnership broker and trainer, and he encourages organizations to accelerate change using global standards in the art and science of collaboration. Nicholas is a senior associate with the Partnering Initiative, and he also heads Co-Curate, a social venture that specializes in multiple stakeholder partnership for inclusive business and social enterprise. So Nicholas, welcome.
Everyone hear me? I have a loud voice, so I'm not even sure if I need this microphone. I'm very, very pleased to be here. It's my pleasure to be in Manila. I work quite extensively in the Philippines and have done for about 9 years now. So it's great to see so many faces here that are interested in hearing what I have to say about multi-stakeholder or multi-sector partnerships. Partnerships are part of everything that we do. It's an essential ingredient in our natural world. It's part of our instinct and our need for community. And we tend to let them grow over time in a very natural, organic way. In recent years, we've focused more and more time on the construction of well-formed, multi-stakeholder and multi-sector relationships, collaborations, and partnerships. We now understand that it's critical to have a blueprint that goes beyond just a simple one-way contract, agreed by all potential partners. However, we often struggle in identifying the right frameworks, the right partners, the right methodologies, and so many elements that form the balance between the art and science of great partnering. So without further ado, this session is just about that. The why, the when, and the how to partner. And I hope in the next hour and a half we have a chance to really understand what it is that builds these types of relationships, these types of partnerships, and how, again, we move beyond the traditional forms of agreements into something that really speaks to a variety of different stakeholders in a variety of different sectors, recognizing that we may have very different perspectives, very different positions. There certainly could be the cultural element there as well. So I think we'll have a chance to go through so much of that. So without further ado, let's start with the plenary discussion. I'm pleased to say that we have 3 prominent panelists with us today, and I'll be introducing them as they come on stage. We'll start with the introductions. I'll give a short presentation on partnership itself. Then we'll have 2 panelist presentations followed by a panelist interview. Then we will ask you for a Q&A with participants. I have to note that unfortunately the digital system hasn't been working, so we're going back to old school style question and answer, and I'll explain that shortly. And then finally we'll have some closing remarks. So recognizing that if the digital system doesn't work, all I would ask you is each and every one of you, you'll have a piece of paper that came with your package. I think, in fact, it's a notepad, a small notepad. If you have any questions, just write on that notepad, tear off that sheet, and then either raise your hand or leave that piece of paper at the end of the table, whatever's more convenient for you. And we'll be sure to have some of the volunteer runners pick them up, bring them over to me, and hopefully if we have time we'll answer those questions. So as Larry mentioned, I'm a senior associate with the Partnering Initiative. I'm also founder of Co-Curate, which is a consulting group that focuses specifically on inclusive business and social ventures. TPI, I think a little bit of the, that's good. TPI started through the International Business Leaders Forum, which is Ivy-left based in the UK, and it focuses purely on multi-sector partnerships. We offer partnership services and training, a variety of different certificate levels, depending on whether you're brokering partnerships or whether you're simply supporting partnerships. We focus also on what we consider to be a center of excellence in knowledge generation and intellectual leadership. And we also work with organizations as they achieve scale and impact for successful partnerships. This is just a variety of some of the organizations that we work for or work with, but please note that this is across sectors. This isn't just NGOs or government or private, this is across sectors. Many of these logos that you see right now, they have not only implemented, they've truly embedded this concept of multi-sector partnerships within their own organizations. So here's the big question. What exactly is a multi-sector partnership? Well, here's a classic definition. A multi-sector partnership is an ongoing working relationship where the risks and the benefits are shared. It's rarely a one-way dialogue. Just as what was discussed this morning, it's a two-way dialogue. This is about engagement on both sides of the proverbial table. It also implies, in practical terms, that each partner is willing to co-create those activities and to be able to bring contributions of different kinds to the partnership and to commit to that notion of mutual accountability. It's really about drawing into each and every one of your strengths and being able to say, this is what I contribute to the overarching partnership. So just based on what I've said, I'm really interested in knowing, as a quick poll and a show of hands, how many people are currently challenged in forming multi-sector partnerships? Just be honest, how many of you are currently challenged in forming multi-sector partnerships? I don't see too many hands there, which is really unusual, but that's great. That's great news. I think that in my experiences in working in this field for about 15 years, one of the big challenges is having that blueprint, that type of framework from which to draw a structured, well-organized partnership. So I just want to give you an example of some of the work that we've recently done in TPI, and that's really what we call emerging trends in multi-sector partnerships. Some of this confirms really what we believed before, and there are a few nuggets, as we say, of new information that came out as a result of our research. So when you consider that we work with hundreds of different organizations, specifically in multi-sector partnerships, we asked them what were some of their most important elements of their partnerships. What really goes into having a well-structured, successful relationship with different stakeholders. So, out of that came 5 issues. First is opportunities for multi-sector collaboration are widening. Now that might seem obvious, but it's important to note that for years and years, as many of you know, working together just seemed too hard. A lot of organizations said, you know what, it's outside of our abilities, I don't think we can do it. It's easier for us to do it alone. Or, if you had a partnership, it might be just a simple contract. You might call it a partnership, but a contract is one element of what I consider a partnership. There's an overarching partnership that has more transformative values in it, where a contract is just one piece of that. And we've recognized that as, let's say, in the private sector, we move from philanthropical ideas to more transformative, that are two-way. That has created new opportunities for multi-sector collaboration, and it certainly is widening. Secondly, organizations are becoming strategic in their engagements. You're seeing not just the private sector, not just government, not just multilaterals, but NGOs, academia, certainly other community-based groups. They are becoming far more savvy with the way in which they form partnerships. That's fantastic news. We're making headway. There's still a long way to go. Measurement would be a very key challenge, I think, for most partnerships that I'm dealing with. How do you really know if you're successful? But the point is, it's become very strategic in their engagements. Organizations increasingly seek global engagement with local action. Fantastic news. We've been working on this for years. So finally, larger entities are recognizing the value at working not just at the big picture at the global level, but also on the ground with those who are really doing the work, and especially that speaks, I think, to each and every one of you in your own respective work and the reasons why you're here at the summit. Stakeholder engagement is increasingly a key business driver for collaboration. If you take the classic example of private industry that's trying to do business in Asia or Africa, they know how important it is now, or becoming more aware of it than they ever were before, and how important it is to identify who are your stakeholders, who are your indirect stakeholders, as well as your direct stakeholders. And finally, this is something that surprised us, but so many of our respondents, not just from the private sector, from all sectors, said that profile, branding, and communication matter. It's so important to choose the right partners, and you can make or break a successful relationship if you don't have the right people or the right organizations at the table. I have just a bit more detail about each of these areas, but just for the interest of time, I'm just going to be a bit brief. I'm hoping that everyone will receive a PDF version of this research, but I think that there's some really interesting insights here about the increased expressed interest in multi-sectoral relationships, more than ever before. Looking at not just the relationship, but what about capacities and engagements amongst each and every one of the partners. One piece, for example, would be, how do we know that each of the partners that are sitting at the table are empowered enough to be able to make good decisions on behalf of their organizations? And if they're not, how can the partnership as a whole seize that opportunity and to be able to work to bring up all of those partners so that they do feel empowered, that they do make good decisions on behalf of their respective organizations, and they feel like they're bringing value to the table. So there's a variety of different pieces in terms of this first statement. I'm just going to move on to the second. I think what's really important here is seeking synergistic relationships with new and existing partners who can support in the delivery of those goals. So again, it's about the vetting process. In my own experience, in my own work, I'm getting more and more requests from different organizations to say, how do we choose the right partners? How do we choose the right, what is the criteria that best serves us? Not just from a metrics perspective, but more of a narrative perspective, more of a qualitative and a quantitative. I'm just going to move on to the rest of these, but I hope it's clear just some of the outcomes of this research. It's been a fascinating discovery of just what's really important to some of our key clients and key members. And again, this is a survey based on a very large number of respondents. So with this in mind, what do organizations look for in partners? Based on our experiences, these are some of the qualities of the ideal partner. They're knowledgeable, they bring clear value propositions, and they understand those value propositions. They're strategic, they're proactive, they create synergies and energies that really help, especially in some of the challenging stages of building partnerships. They're flexible, they're willing to communicate with excellence, but also be fair but firm. They create profile, they're willing to share their networks, they feel collaborative. It's one thing to say you're collaborative, it's another thing to actually demonstrate that collaborative, especially from a lateral perspective. And finally, they're transparent, they're willing to share, and they trust. That's so important to any successful partnership. So, how do organizations partner? This is my second quick poll. I'd love to know how many of you right now, when you're building your partnerships, and again, just to be clear, when I say partnerships or multi-sector partnerships, I'm also talking about something more robust than just a contract. How many of you right now use a specific framework in order to build and maintain your multi-sector partnerships? Just with a show of hands, honestly, how many of you do that? So how many of you actually just build partnerships based on instinct and what you think you know is the best way to do things? Honestly, it's a very common way to do it. Okay, I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of some of the frameworks that we encourage and employ in order to build these partnerships. This is one of the more robust frameworks, and I actually won't talk about this one, but this is something that we're going to discuss later on during my guided discussion, which I think starts at 5:30 today. But this is looking at core elements of the partnership cycle from a quadrant perspective. This is the simplified partnership cycle. And again, even if it's just these 5 steps, it's amazing to see how much more successful we've seen our members become just using these simple 5 steps. It's about finding, engaging, building, implementing, and reviewing. So that is finding, how do you find the right partners? And how do you vet those partners? How do you know that they're the right ones and not the wrong ones? Because as we all know, if you have the wrong partners, it can mean a disastrous effect if you're not careful. How do you know that you have shared interests and that there's complementary resources? How do you know that my views might be compatible with yours? When you get into the process of engaging as that second step, what is your existing reputation and credentials? What do you bring to that partnership? How do you communicate that value proposition that you have? It's really, really core principle. Personal engagement, being able to demonstrate trust, transparency, and mutual benefit, all the fundamental tenets of a good multi-sector partnership. Knowing where that right entry point is, as well as preparing for that exit point. And then finally, what is your offer, and how do you demonstrate that offer? When you get into the building stage, this is usually where people start to falter. It becomes very challenging because you've signed the agreement and you're on your way, but how do you actually create that? How do you create true needs and with flexibility, knowing that this is the way we're going to go forward, but just like you sail a boat, what happens if the wind changes? How do you chart a new course, and how are you willing to be adaptable to chart that new course? All about innovation. What I'm talking about, again, is multi-sector partnerships that are very, very different from your classic contract, one-way contract. Finally, it's about clear expectations, roles, and responsibilities. Knowing who delivers what. Implementing. How much project management is there involved in this type of partnership? And who takes responsibility for that? Perhaps that's one of the strengths of the partners. Be explicit enough for people to know where that's coming from. And share that knowledge if you can. The same with relationship management. Some partners are inevitably better than others at sharing their ideas and being open and honest. How can you make that infectious across the partnership? Right communication and constant creation of opportunities for wider engagement. Really important. Finally, as you get into that reviewing stage, it's about reviewing, but more specifically, it's about measuring. How well have you planned and planted those seeds of measurement and come up with a baseline so that when you get closer towards the end of your partnership cycle, you can measure effectively and you can say these are the outcomes, and it's not just about numbers, it's about all of the things that are more perhaps social in outcomes that are very, very important to some of your stakeholders. It's about assessing partner value and how to add that greater value. So that's just the very simple partnership brokering cycle. I will talk about the more robust version a little later on. But in summary, partnerships work when you have the right partners. They achieve the right results. They give value all to all partners beyond just the initial costs, and they understand and appreciate the transaction costs involved in putting this together. They remain or can be adapted to be strategically important to both sides. There's an engagement and a buy-in from the partners and organizations beyond just the single individual. This is not just about a single individual who may leave the partnership. It's about making sure that there's all of the strength that's being built up in the organization that transcends one particular individual. As I mentioned, it's high standards of project management and relationship management. And finally, it's about having that culture of knowing that you have to review, you have to measure. It's so important, and it's often lost. Even if you don't know how to measure, there are a wealth of resources out there that can be shared. So, that's all I'm going to say about it for now. I'm officially out of time, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview of some of the work that we do at Partnering Initiative. Again, we'll have a more in-depth guidance session at 5:30 to 7 o'clock, I think it is, this evening, and it's in Summit Hall C. You can also feel free to contact us at thepartnerinitiative.org, and that's my email address. And again, I will make sure that there's a PDF of this presentation in case you need it. Thank you. So, I'm just going to move now into the panel discussion. Again, if you have any questions, please write them on a piece of paper and either raise your hand or just put the paper at the end of the table and someone will come around and collect them. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up Rodger Voorhies to the stage. He's the Director of Financial Services for the Poor at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
May pwedeng lumapit doon. Please, may lumapit doon. Takbo. Isip, akit na. Ay, no. Tapos nag-spray.
Can you switch the PowerPoint presentation, please? No. Would you like more?
So that's much better. All right. My name is Rodger Voorhies. I'm with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and I'm the Director of Financial Services for the Poor. And it is a fabulous honor to be with you today. I spent most of my career in the field, and actually began in microfinance in 1985 with the ARES project in USAID. So not nearly as long as Mohammed Yunus or others in the audience, but certainly from the early days. And went on to work with Opportunity International in a number of countries and founded an organization called Opportunity International Bank of Malawi, where I spent a big piece of my career before joining the Gates Foundation. And one of the reasons I'm excited to be here today is because having been in your place a long time of coming to conferences like this, I just want to actually start out by congratulating each of you for the amazing work that you do every day on the ground. And I know that many of you are probably struggling to say, I've left my organization, I've got to check my email, I've got to make sure that when things are going on, how are repayment rates today, how are savings rates today? And so I'm hoping that as I get to spend some time with you, I can share a little bit of what we're learning at the Gates Foundation and a little bit about how we think about partnerships. So I'll just walk through a few slides and look forward to some of the questions later. So The slide on the wall behind me actually is something from the Global Findex, and it's a number we didn't have for a long time, and it's actually how many people are included and how many people are excluded from financial services. How big is the problem that we're dealing with? And the problem is really 2.5 billion people are left out of financial services. And while we've accomplished great amount in this industry, we're somewhere between, approximately 200 million people receive microloans from institutions like the ones you run. The size of the problem is more than 10 times as big. And I want to challenge you today that where we need to go is to substantially increase access. And that's going to take new kinds of partnerships. That's going to take new kinds of innovation and new kinds of thinking. And we at the Gates Foundation are engaged in this work because we believe we're at the forefront and the cusp of radical changes using technology and using new ways of delivering services that can help you and other organizations leverage your impact in a manner that will transform the lives of low-income people around the world. I want to pull out a couple of the slides from places that we work and some of the places that I spent a long time. And what I want to start out is that our partnerships that we think about are how do we take what works for low-income people. Things like microcredit and micro savings and the group environment that so transform the way we think about services. And how do we leverage them in much bigger ways? We held a savings conference last week where we brought in different kinds of partners from around telecommunication companies, banks, and traditional savings-led groups. And what came out of that was the excitement around new technology and new ways of reaching the people. But let's remember, there has been great successes. Since 1990, the number of people living in extreme poverty has fallen in half. And the microfinance movement has grown in dramatic ways that in some ways, as I look at other developmental spaces, they don't have the kinds of partnerships between the public sector and the private sector that many of you in this room have fostered and developed. But I have to also tell you, coming from the other side of it, we have a long way to go. These are pictures of Opportunity Bank of Malawi, and as I moved into the foundation, one of the challenges that Bill and Melinda presented to us was tell us answers to three questions. Why financial services matter to the poor? Why the informal tools they have are not good enough? And what would radically change the economics of delivering services to the poor that unlock that potential? And at OIBM, we were one of the early pioneers in savings work, and the foundation put a huge amount of money into savings. And I can tell you that while we learned that savings matter to the poor, we also learned that the current way we do things is not powerful enough. And there's still a lot of money left under mattresses that aren't reaching in. And it's not that the poor don't have assets. I think we heard this morning from Professor Yunus, over almost $1 billion in Grameen Bank alone, right? The poor have assets. And they're not just financial assets, but their intellect and their power and their services, and there's innovation that happens in the field every time, but they don't have the ability to be connected into a financial system that helps them leverage those assets. We've also learned that payments matter. And payments are incredibly important, especially in a country like the Philippines, where there's so many workers abroad. And payments matter not just between countries internationally, which has received a lot of attention over the years, but we've just finished a study, an 11-country study in sub-Saharan Africa. And 1/3 of Africans in that 11-country study had received some long-distance payment in the previous month. That's 80 million people that were either paying or receiving money to each other. And that number is 6 times bigger than the international remittance in terms of number of payments, and 3 times bigger than value. So the poor are active users of payments. The poor are active users of financial institutions when they have access to them. And one of the big challenges is that right now the infrastructure doesn't exist in a way that works for them. On average, poor people pay up to 74% more for financial services than rich people. And we know that poor people struggle with that, but we also know that the economics don't work for providers either. Now, it worked for microcredit. my institutions that I ran were profitable, like many of your institutions here. But it worked because we were able to charge high rates of interest in order to supplement the cost of those services to the poor. But it meant that they struggled not just in what they had to pay for the interest rate, which many of their businesses generated that income, but they also struggled because the size of the payment was too big for them, or the size of the transaction was too large. And even with group methodologies, there was a lot of social capital that was required. Like going to one of these big hypermarket stores, rather than buying them in sachet sizes of daily use the way they do with soap or oil or sugar. We've also tried to downscale, and that downscale has been effective in many, many areas, but it just doesn't go far enough. It doesn't reach the 2.5 billion people, the 77% of people living A large study done at OIBM, and this is a picture of OIBM, actually showed that if you could create default accounts for farmers, where they could receive their money because they get paid all at once, and they just held it in a commitment account, it increased the use of fertilizer by 35% and increased an almost a 20% increase in disposable income. And everyone in this room knows that a 20% increase in disposable income is the difference between kids in school and not in school. Between a dirt floor and a concrete floor. Between a thatched roof and a tin roof. And that makes big differences. We also know that financial services matter because of the assets they create, whether it's energy in the home to read by so you can study, or clean water, which is hugely important to low-income folks in many parts of the world, or building community that actually helps share resources and helps us in times of emergencies share those. So we at the Foundation have actually begun to approach this and said, what would it take to transform the economics? And our first step is that we think payments really matter. And the only way to make the transactions work for poor people and to work for providers is to think about how we would digitize financial services to unlock that potential. Because poor people want a variety of services. They don't just need credit. They don't just need loans, rather. They don't just need savings. They need financial services when they need them. Because poor people are not statically poor, but rather they're rising and falling through poverty by the hundreds of millions over time. And they're being pushed down by emergencies in their life or raised up by opportunities. And small changes to buffering the risk of emergencies have big changes to the impact of people keeping the gains they've so hard worked for over the years. A study in Kenya showed that just being a member of M-Pesa protected them against the risk of small emergencies in their household, so that if you were a member of M-Pesa, your disposable income was pretty steady because poor people self-insure, and if you were not, your income even 6 months later was decreased by 10%. But to do this is going to take new partnerships than we've worked with before. It's going to take real business models and cost reduction and market behaviors that are transformative both for us as institutions and for the environments we work in. And so we ask ourselves a few big questions. If digitization can cut 90% of the cost, what would it take in the value chain to make radical differences, and how can institutions like yours make big differences in onboarding and developing financial services for poor people? And some of the questions I'll put up on the board. One is, what if we could shorten the mobile money, or we could shorten using mobile money, the sign-up process from 30 days to 30 seconds? Right now, in many countries, it can take up to 45 days to open a bank account, and 90% of the time, that's paperwork on the ground, with up to 50% rejection rates. What if everyone could be an agent? What if you could actually leverage the social communities that you're already in? And there are companies trying this around the world, including Leftley Pay in China. What if every mobile phone could send and receive money to every other mobile phone, so that financial services were available just the way you sign up for a prepaid account? Or what if we were able that payment processing was digital and close to zero in cost, And the power of that is not just that it lowers the financial costs for financial transactions, but it opens up platforms for all kinds of innovation to do things that were previously way too expensive for poor people to do. So what if you could actually pre-buy your fertilizer and then understand what soil nutrition was? Or some of the other health concerns that Mohammed Yunus talked about earlier today. What if you linked financial services into that? And the cost of those payments were close to zero. What kinds of innovations would that unlock? And what if you could send money to any other person, and if every phone came with both a savings account and a credit account? One of the big challenges that low-income people face is we don't know them. We know a lot about health, we know a lot about agronomy, but we know very little about the financial lives of poor people. And what if assessing the risk for 1 billion new people was cost-effective and profitable? We at the Foundation are trying to use this technology around mobile payments, which are reaching, well, mobile financial services, which are reaching over 20 million people. But mobile phones reach the 1.7 of the 2.5 billion people left out. How do we leverage new technology? How do we create new ways to approach the poor? And how do digital financial services, which are invisible to many people around the world and seem rather wonky, unlock new potential? Now this is a paradigm shift from where we came from. But all of us in this room are inheritors of a paradigm shift that before said that poor people couldn't borrow, that we couldn't trust women to pay back because they would have too many other obligations. A paradigm shift that said that poor people actually would be great people to take savings from because they could save. And I remember even 20 years ago, everyone said, oh, the poor can't save, they don't have money. You are the great people who have implemented paradigm shifts before. And now we're at a chance to do another paradigm shift that requires partnerships between technology innovators, between different kinds of providers, and between traditional players to leverage financial access in new and exciting ways that actually can unlock potential for the 2.5 billion people who are left out. I think that we have a great opportunity. Vaccine delivery, new kinds of seeds, these kinds of technology developments, when they were leveraged by the development community, have cut the number of people living in poverty by half. And I think it's time that we rise up and we figure out how we do this again. And I hope that we'll be partnering with some of you as we move forward as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to think of new ways to approach the poor, using new channels of distribution, but always keeping in mind what works for the poor so they can manage their lives and manage the riskiness of their lives better. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me? Could I have my presentation back on the screen, please? Great. Thank you very much for that. Next up is a presentation by Richard Leftley. He's the CEO of MicroEnsure, and we started this session with his amazing video. I enjoyed that. So without further ado, please, Richard, come to the stage.
Put my presentation up there. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for having me to come talk to you today, and I'm excited to be with you. Originally it was supposed to be in the morning before lunch, but they decided that we were going to be so interesting and exciting that they better keep us for after lunch so that we could try and get you energized. My background originally was in the insurance industry, and 12 years ago I got absolutely fascinated by this opportunity to see whether we could bring insurance to many millions of people through Africa and Asia. In fact, joined Opportunity International with Larry as my boss, and spent quite a long time working with Opportunity International before we created MicroEnsure as a standalone company. So, in preparing for today's discussion, Larry asked me to think through a number of the partnerships that we as MicroEnsure have been engaged in around the world. And as I thought about the most successful partnerships that we have, it kind of struck me that there is a common theme which runs through the most successful partnerships that we have. And that common theme is this kind of, I like to call it a shared sense of necessity. And this shared sense of necessity is when both kind of sets of partners come to the table and realize that they need something that they don't have themselves. They need something from the other party. So, as a microinsurance specialist, as an organization that is providing insurance to the mass market, we have had to have a partnership at the heart of our business. We rely on partners both upstream, in terms of insurance companies that we work with, as well as downstream, in terms of microfinance organizations and mobile phone companies that we need to work with in order to distribute our products to the mass market. You see, when we're trying to identify a good partner that can distribute our products, we have three key attributes that we keep in mind. The first is that we're looking for an organization that has a really strong brand. It's important that the clients that we're interfacing with, the low income, the poor people, the middle income people, that they're going to trust this organization. Because they're going to, if we're going to try and sell a financial service, they need to believe that that organization is going to be around in a year's time in order to provide them with service. Secondly, we're looking for organizations that have points of sale that are accessible to the poor. And then finally, we're looking for organizations that can transact cash, because we need to collect premiums and we need to be able to pay our claims quickly. And for us, as MicroEnsure, our necessity is the fact that we don't want to create this distribution by ourselves. As a microinsurance specialist, our average revenue is just 23 US cents per policy. So we have a very small revenue. And if we had to create our own brand and our own points of sale and our own ability of transacting cash, then it wouldn't be a sustainable business model. So, for many years, we were working with microfinance organizations, and in fact, we still work with over 100 microfinance organizations in Africa and Asia. In fact, here in the Philippines, we service nearly 2.5 million clients through a range of microfinance organizations. But in some other countries that we worked in, we discovered that we couldn't actually reach scale. We couldn't reach, and when I mean scale, I mean tens of millions of clients. We could reach maybe hundreds of thousands of clients by working exclusively with microfinance organizations, but we couldn't reach tens of millions of people by just working with microfinance organizations in many countries. Some countries, yes, but not all countries. And so we started to ask ourselves which organizations that we could partner with in order to reach tens of millions of clients. And it struck us that the best kinds of organizations would probably be mobile phone companies. So we're a small company. We were 3 years old when we first started thinking about working with mobile phone companies. And I have to admit, it was a little bit daunting because most of us know about these mobile phone companies. And in the economies that we work in, these are the dominant brands. These are the big guys. These are the big companies. And so here we are, a little company with just 15 or 20 staff. How are we going to go and be relevant to a mobile phone company? And for those of you that kind of know mobile phone companies, you'll know that they're split really into kind of two kinds, or two halves. The first half is what I'm going to call the core business. So this is selling airtime to people to make phone calls and to send text messages. And the second part of a mobile phone company is actually a mobile wallet, so the mobile account side of the business. But for us, we wanted to work with the core part of the business. We didn't want to work with the mobile wallet side of the business because outside of Kenya, where clearly M-Pesa has a huge market share, the mobile accounts are relatively small as compared to the number of people with a prepaid account. So in order to get this partnership underway, we knew what we wanted. We knew that we wanted to get access to the mobile phone company's brand, and we wanted to get access to their distribution. But we had to articulate what it was that they needed from us. What was it that the mobile phone companies desperately needed in order to work with MicroEnsure? And we had to be brutally honest. We had to be very honest with ourselves in thinking this through. And we actually came to this kind of understanding, I guess, which is that actually no one wakes up in the morning wanting to buy insurance. So I'd love to know, how many of you woke up this morning and thought, you know what, I've got to buy insurance today, I really want to do that. You know, that's something that I feel really excited about, you know, it's something that I'm really excited about having insurance. I mean, none of us do that, right? And poor people don't do that. If you look at the statistics, only 1 or 2 or 3 or 4% of people in the countries that we all work in actually buy insurance. So no one wakes up in the morning saying, look, I'm going to go buy insurance. But people do wake up every day worried about the risks that they face. They worry about what happens if my husband dies, what happens if my children get sick, what happens if a flood comes and destroys the place that I live in. And so we went to the mobile phone companies and we said, you know, we think you've got a problem. Your problem is that your clients aren't very loyal. So most of you will know that in your countries, people have multiple SIM cards, and they use multiple SIM cards, so depending on who they're phoning, or depending on who's running a promotion. And so we went to the mobile phone companies, and we said to the mobile phone companies, look, we think that no one buys insurance, but we believe that if we offer free insurance, so if the mobile phone company pays the premium on behalf of the clients, that they will change their behavior in order to get that free insurance. So if we reward their loyalty, if we reward them spending more of their airtime on one network as compared to another, then we will actually be able to justify that expenditure. And we were surprised because we introduced this product. After 6 weeks, we were expecting a phone call in 6 months' time, but in 6 weeks, we got a phone call from the mobile phone company saying, it worked. People have increased their loyalty, they're more loyal, they're spending more airtime with us and they're churning, you know, they're moving to other networks less often. And so we took this idea, we took this, this shared sense of necessity. MicroEnsure needed the mobile phone company, and we demonstrated to the mobile phone company that they needed us to help their clients be more loyal. And we started to work with a range of other mobile phone companies. So today, MicroEnsure works with MTN, with Tigo, with SR, with Telenor, and in the last few weeks with Airtel. And this has been the effect that it's had on our business. So starting at the bottom of the curve there, that's December 2009. That's where we were working just with mobile phone companies, just with the microfinance organizations. And we were struggling to get past about 600,000 active clients. And we started working with the mobile phone companies, and 3 years later, we're reaching 4.5 million active clients at the end of 2012. And that continues to grow and go beyond that. So for us, understanding this shared sense of necessity, understanding that each partner had to bring something to the table that the other one needed, was critical in actually being able to access these large organizations and reach scale for the poor. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Richard. Okay, so last but not least, I'd like to welcome to the stage. Sorry, can I have my slides back here? I'd like to welcome to the stage Edgar Henroso, and he is the CEO and President of the Microcredit Finance Corporation. So we're just going to have a short interview with Edgar.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for joining us, Edgar.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about some background about your organization and some of the partnerships that drive your strategic initiatives.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm with the Philippines. I head the People's Credit and Finance Corporation, which is the lead government agency for wholesale microfinance services delivery. Well, aside from us, there are other 4 government agencies applicable to wholesale microfinancing. Before we go into partnering with private institutions, I'd just like to put into perspective the National Strategy Framework for Microfinance in the Philippines, which was placed in 1999. There are 4 basic principles in that. First one is the government wants greater role for the private sector in microfinance. Second, the government is putting up an enabling environment so that there will be facilitating entry of private investors. And third, there should be market-oriented financial and credit policies. And the other one is that government non-line agencies should not go into credit implementation. Given these parameters, The 5 wholesale agencies partnered with rural banks, cooperatives, and non-governmental agencies to start a microfinance program in the Philippines. As Professor Gilda stated earlier, it's 31 years ago that microfinance was introduced with Negros Women and ASHI, which are 2 of my most famous partners in the Philippines actually, and we're happy to know that they're here. So we went into a process of looking at who are the retail players in the rural areas, in the countryside, who can help infuse microfinance services in the country. And rural banks are there, the cooperatives there, and the non-governmental agencies. So we're into wholesale microfinance services.
Was it a struggle to bring those stakeholders to the table? Did they understand the value of what you were trying to do?
For NGOs and cooperatives, I don't think there was any problem because they were the forerunners of microfinance in the Philippines even before it was formally introduced in 1995. Where rural banks were doing ugly credit initially because they're in the rural countryside and the Philippines is basically an agricultural country. So therefore, they were basically doing microfinance in the sense of micro-agri production and loans. So it was not really a problem in terms of inviting them to partner with us. I guess this is really an example of in line with our theme of partnership against poverty because all of them are now into microfinance and trying to bring a decent living for marginalized.
Did you find that you needed to provide additional information beyond the demonstrating the value of what you were trying to achieve to make sure that each of those partners understood what was their role and what was the expectation?
Well, aside from the financial side of things, we also do what we call institutional capacity building for our partners. So before they even venture into microfinance itself, we do what we call a value-added service of giving them trainings and seminars on what is microfinance and how. Because microfinance is a very expensive venture, so to speak, and mostly bankers would not really dwell into these types of financing at the outset. So we did a lot of institutional capacity building from the retail institution side as well as the entire side. For instance, one of the projects we are undertaking right now in PCFC, we conducted 4 training sessions on financial literacy, and we are able to put up now 80 trainers for financial literacy for the ground level. And we are expecting these 80 trainers to conduct training sessions for another 500 trainers. Given, let's say, a potential market of about 20 million microfinance end clients, then we need more trainers now to do financial literacy lectures. So these are the types of institutional things that we need.
Edgar, would you be willing to share perhaps some of the lessons learned that, based on some of the challenges that you've had along the way in your time in building the foundation of what you have now?
Probably one thing I would like to impart to you is that simply never shortcut microfinance. I mean, in short, we cannot, let's say for a retail institution, probably if I want to increase outreach fast, I can shortcut microfinance by not conducting, value formation, etc. So I just give them the money because outreach. But I don't think you will succeed if you do these kinds of things. So what I'm simply saying is, microfinance is a process in itself. It is a multi-dimensional task. Let's not try to shortcut things.
And how about the private sector? Over time, have you seen an increase in their interest in participating in some of your initiatives? And if you take very prominent private sector organizations such as Jollibee, of course, Jollibee Foundation, how responsive have they been over time?
Well, let's face it, I think everybody appreciates that microfinance is a very profitable venture. So with that in mind, I think it's easy for them to look into this venture. But we must be imparting to them also the social orientation mission of microfinance. It's not enough that we make money and sustain ourselves, but we look at the people that we are serving. We'd like to see them give a decent, do a decent life. So I guess for NGO, I think we're very happy with this type of partners we have right now. I think we have about 50 of them right now. All of the country, I have about 130 partners within microfinance, serving about 3 million right now as of June of this year. By the way, we do have what we call a microfinance program committee, which is the membership of the 5 government wholesale agencies in the Philippines. When as of September, our active clients has run up to 10 million, with a potential client of about 26 million. So we're just about halfway through our microfinance activities.
And just a quick reminder to everyone in the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them down on a piece of paper and raise your hand. Someone will come along and collect those, and I'll begin to read those out very shortly. Just one final question, Edgar, with regards to measurement. Have you found it fairly easy to be able to identify what success means and how to best measure that, not just from a quantitative but also a qualitative perspective?
Well, some of our partners have been doing what they call the, if I'm not mistaken, they do what they call a baseline data measurement in terms of the clients they're serving. Then 5 years hence, after giving microfinance, they do an impact assessment on if this microfinance entity have really done it. I guess the best example that was presented earlier, the 2 ladies who were recipients of microfinance earlier in the Philippines. We have a lot of these. I mean, I hope we can share. I think we have some total diaries of these that we can present to you, how microfinance has succeeded in the Philippines. We do measure them in terms of this.
If you had a crystal ball and you could look into the next few years for your organization, what are some of the key highlights of the next wave of doing business and the way in which partnerships will influence that?
Well, perhaps some of the challenges that I see in the future will be one, as Professor Gilda said earlier, that nobody should be left out. There are still areas where the market penetration is low, perhaps because these are poorer communities. I'd like to challenge our partners to think of these areas more and go to these people. They may not be the more entrepreneurial people, but what we're saying is we want to end poverty. Anybody who's poor, we want to target them. Well, that's one of the challenges. Of course, we have to consider, by doing so, perhaps your transaction cost will be higher. But there are now technologies in terms of mobile banking, mobile technology. So I hope you can sort of study both of these areas in terms of efficiency and also cost effectiveness. So this is one. And then of course we have to do more of the financial strategies. For instance, as I mentioned earlier, microfinance is a very costly venture. No? So in terms of risk, it is also high. So we have to do more on the risk management microfinance. We have to study measures and strategies to reduce risk in terms of this area. One is credit bureau. It's nice to note that, for your information, 7 of my partners, of PCFC partners, have established what they call their own microcredit bureau system operating in the country right now. And the one heading that is Card, Mr. Ali. So these are some of the things we'd like to see that we challenge more of them to go into now.
Okay. Thanks very much for that, Edgar. So we'll just now move on to the question and answer period. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to bring them up. I think we have some runners that will be happy to come and collect your questions. The first question is for Rodger, of you. The question is, you have done a great job, but many of us are worried that funders' fascination with mobile financial services will reduce poverty alleviation through financial inclusion to a technical fix, leading to neglect of the human element and the institutional strengthening needed to make MFS really work for the poorest and especially poor.
So we'll talk from this one, I think. So look, I think that, having come from an implementing institution, I think that that's a fear that a lot of us in the audience have. What I would answer to that is this, that There have been a lot of points in the world of development where we've worried that technology would take away the human element, and then no longer would that great interaction we have with the client be necessary, or that's really where the developmental delivery comes from. And certainly that human element is really important, and it's one of the reasons why people stay with institutions even when they have to pay really high rates of interest when there are alternatives. So what I would argue, there are a couple things. One is that the embracing of technology and lowering the cost structure actually, I don't know why that eliminates the human touch. It does allow a massification and an outreach that's much bigger, but then it probably frees up resources to spend more time on an individual basis with clients than what many of us can do now. Two, I don't think the space belongs only to telcos and only to banks who can offer mobile financial services. I think it actually, the payment and the transaction side gets radically changed by those platforms, but if there are ways for microfinance institutions to leverage that capacity, it might actually eliminate a lot of the manpower and allow even greater amounts of interaction with customers. So I think in the long run, the technology is coming. It is making differences. And it's how do we continue to engage with customers and develop these deep relationships. I don't think that the technology takes that away. I think that in some ways it's an artificial fear.
Okay. Next question is for Richard. And it's a question in regards to insurance. What are challenges in microinsurance renewal as against selling a new policy?
Yeah. Well, I think it gets down to the heart of the issue, which is, do people really want to buy insurance? And so they will only buy, well, at the moment, very few people in the environment actually buy a product, and therefore it's difficult, or one of the issues is getting them to renew the product. For us, we have seen that the only way to get to scale and be sustainable is to embed that product into some other kind of service. So whether that's a loan, or a savings account, or a mobile phone account. I think the key challenge in getting people to renew is to demonstrate to those individuals that there really is value. So what we've done as MicroEnsure is we've had to acknowledge that it's very difficult to sell these policies to people. So you need to get them into their hands and let them experience the product. And the way that we've done that is through microfinance organizations and through mobile phone companies. And then what we've tried to do is we've tried to communicate and educate those consumers around how the product works and how they can make a claim. And we have made sure that when claims do arise, that they're paid quickly. So our target is to pay claims within 72 hours. And at the moment, globally, we managed to meet that target in 94% of cases. And that sends a very strong signal into the brand guys, into the environments that people live in, that this product can actually be tested, can actually be trusted. And so what we've managed to do then is, after say 6 months or 9 months of putting a product out there, which has been embedded into a mobile phone account or into a microfinance loan, is then convert those people from an insurance which is embedded to a product which is actually being paid for. And once you can do that, then the renewal rate is actually much, much higher. So you have to get people to a point where they see the value in the product that they're buying. And if you can't do that, then you're never going to capture their hearts and their minds.
Just a follow-up to that, with regards to how comprehensive the insurance is, what would it take to make your schemes more comprehensive than they are today?
So we currently provide quite a wide range of products. I mean, we provide a range of life, health, property, weather index, livestock, political violence. There's quite a wide range of coverages that are provided. The model that I was describing today is a model where we have to get a very simple product. In fact, we're launching a product later this month, early November, in Pakistan, through a mobile phone company that has no exclusions. So it has absolutely no exclusions. If you die from any cause, and regardless of how old you are, so you can be anywhere from 0 to unlimited age. There's no age restriction at all on the product. And so these products are extremely simple. In fact, they're so simple that you can describe them on a single text message. And you get that product into someone's hands, and then what we've seen is that we can then upsell them to more complex products. So what I think we're learning is that you have to start with a very simple product, which is very inexpensive. And then once people trust the product, once they see that it actually works, it's possible to upsell them. So in a country like Tanzania, we're currently selling 10,000 health insurance policies a month through the mobile. And we had to start people off with a very basic life insurance product, and then have a partnership with them, have a relationship with them over the course of 12 months before we could even start to sell them health insurance. And now 10,000 people are voluntarily signing up to those products every single month.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Edgar. How do you wholesale the credit to partners, and what is the recovery mechanism?
Well, we do have a process of accreditation for our partners. We look at their management capability, we look at their financial standing, and of course their experience in the microfinance. So they undergo a process of evaluation in our part, and they pass this. We do accredit them and give them credit line for microfinance services delivery. And then transactions are basically based on bank-to-bank transactions. We simply have a recovery mechanism where we pay 2 months and we see the payment.
And forgive me, I can't read all of the handwriting here, but I think the question was also about rate of wholesale interest.
Wholesale interest rates.
The wholesale interest rate.
Yes.
Well, right now our wholesale interest rate is running from 8 to 12%, depending on certain criteria we look at in terms of our partners. There are partners, on the other hand, the retail rates will be running to about 16 to 20%.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Rodger. It is exciting to me to see the Gates Foundation get behind financial services for the poor. I think your brand can bring more people into this space. With that in mind, how can individuals, especially young people, support your work?
That's a great question. So I think that one of the things to remember about the foundation is that while we have a lot of financial resources, one of our goals is the power to convene people together around new ideas and new approaches. And so, but they express themselves locally. So for young people, I would say get involved in your community, because we as a foundation, we don't implement, right? We're a family foundation, and we provide research and public policy and the catalyst around building individual institutions. But I would probably say the right place to begin, especially when you're younger, is to figure out what you can do locally and how you get involved with local organizations on the ground, because I think that's where you really learn a lot.
Okay, thanks. Richard, as MNOs begin to partner with one another, how do you adapt your value proposition to assure strategic relevance of partnerships between MicroEnsure and mobile network operators?
I think that, I don't think it really changes. I mean, in fact, what we see is that in some countries, the mobile network operators are just single entities, single organizations. And then in other countries, there are these multinational organizations like Telenor or Axiata or Vodafone and Airtel. And I think that as an organization, we have worked with both kind of single, standalone mobile network operators, as well as those that operate, have merged together and formed kind of networks of mobile network operators. I think in order to be relevant to them, we need to be able to bring something to the table that they themselves need. And so you need to be very, very clear about what it is as an organization that you can do that they can't do themselves. And you need to be able to do that at a price point which they can't do for themselves. In fact, earlier this year, I think as a kind of an example of how I think the mobile phone companies see this space evolving, one of the biggest mobile network operators in Asia, Telenor, which owns Grameenphone, Telenor Pakistan, Digi, DTAC, as well as Uninor, and they're also now entering Myanmar, actually set up a joint venture with MicroEnsure and took a 51% equity stake in that business. So I think these mobile network operators, as they aggregate into multinational conglomerates actually are looking for partners that can work with them across national boundaries and implement products across national boundaries. The learnings that we take from one country can be implemented elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. We just have one final question, and I think we're going to have to end the session. And this is a combo question for Edgar and Rodger. In selecting NGO partners, or if I can say in selecting any partners, but perhaps specifically NGO partners, especially those which provide developmental services, would you go for those which are willing to learn the MFI nuts and bolts, or those which can link your financial services to the unreached poor? And why?
Okay. Well, I guess, in a general statement, as I said, nobody gets left out. So I'd rather see NGOs who are really more into going into the poorer areas of people we're planning to serve. I'd like to see the more NGOs are more on the developmental side of things. Although, I mean, they must be profitable to sustain the operation. I see them more on the developmental side. And I mean, let's face it, microfinance is not the panacea for poverty alleviation. As Professor Gilda said, it is a tool. It's not the end or the P&L of microfinance. It's only a tool. I mean, you might not be poor economically, but probably in other areas, socially, you might be poor. For example, I can say what he said is that probably you might be earning and eating 3 times a day, but if you get sick, there is no hospital to go to. If there's security problem, there's no police to go to. You're still poor. So what I'm saying is I think that type of agency in partnership with all players should undertake this development type of services.
I think I'd probably change that question slightly on our end and say, as the Gates Foundation, we look at the space in a couple of ways. One of the great successes of microfinance that almost every other development area hasn't been able to achieve is this public-private partnerships that have been created. And because of that, there's a large amount of private sector and social sector as well as public sector money that flows into microfinance each year, including wholesale financiers like Edgar. And those wholesale numbers end up in the billions of dollars. So if we think about scaling up existing models to larger numbers of people, I would probably argue, both as a practitioner and now as a funder, that those monies exist. Where we look for are partners that actually have the ability to either create a great demonstration case that is scalable and crowds in public and private sector money around that space, or something that's really innovative that has a catalytic change to it. And I think as we as a foundation, in our particular role, is we look for those kinds of partnerships, either around something that's catalytic or something that it creates a demonstration case that crowds others in. But I think that's one of the great successes of microfinance, is that it's attracted large amounts of money to scale it up from existing models.
Okay, thank you.
Someone bring microphone from
Yes, and so
Not sure I really follow question.
so if I think what you were mentioning, and this was one of the questions we just didn't get a chance to talk about it, perhaps this, and tell me if I'm wrong, it's this notion that we should have, instead of public-private partnerships, public-poor partnerships.
Public-poor partnership.
Yep.
As because our target is poor, and today's seminar is also, our summit is also poverty. So why do you not go for the headline to make a public-poor partnership, directly going to the poor, as we have already practiced in Bangladesh, public-poor partnership, with addressing all the health, education, housing, and livelihood all together, centering the microcredit and more centering the mother, with the first mother.
Yeah.
So this is the big thing we are doing already, and I think we can discuss with this.
Yeah, and I think
poor partnership, mind
Yeah.
as because.
So I think there are some great examples out there that represent public-poor partnerships, and I thank you for bringing this up, because I think it's a really good point.
Thank you.
I certainly think, from my perspective in building the frameworks, So many times we often overlook that as those stakeholders, and especially they tend to be the indirect stakeholders when they really should be the direct. And that is, they're always put off to the outskirts as opposed to being active contributors at that proverbial table.
Exactly.
So, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Would any of you three like to comment on that?
So mindset.
Great, thank you. Any of you like to comment very quickly on that? But I think it's a really good point. So thanks for that. Okay. Perhaps we can talk about it offline then. Okay, thank you. So that's all the time we have for this session. Let's just give our panelists a quick round of applause for their time and their presentations. Could I have my presentation back on screen, please? So I think, unfortunately, we don't have very much time for closing remarks, but this conversation could obviously continue for many, many hours. And I encourage you to take this offline and reach out to any of us if you have any other further questions or comments. I think really this is just the start of this conversation. So thanks again to the panelists. There's my email address once again if you want to contact me directly. And, come on, there we go. Finally, we have a message from Melinda Bunker, who will come up on stage, and she has a message of commitment. So, Mila, could you please come on stage?
As one of the original member of Social Performance Task Force, I was tasked to deliver the commitment to the campaign through the Social Performance Task Force from Laura Cruz, the Director of Social Performance Task Force. The Social Performance Task Force is a group of investors, practitioners, networks who have joined together in a consortium to develop the universal standard for social performance. And here is the commitment of the Social Performance Task Force. SPTF commits to creating a technical guide to accompany the universal standards for social performance management. The universal standards for social performance management help MFIs align their institution to the social goals, their state in their mission. A technical manual will provide a step-by-step guide for this financial institution to effectively implement their social goals. While the universal standards as a whole help financial institutions improve social performance management, Section 1 specifically helps MFI sets a strategy to meet their social goals, operationalize that strategy, and then set and monitor goals over a period of time. This process includes collecting, reporting, and ensuring the accuracy of client-level data related to the institution's social goal so that MFIs can effectively act in their social mission and credibly report on the progress they are making. Therefore, the more closely organizations adhere to Section 1 of the Universal Standard, the better data and information we will have about the progress they are making in lifting citizens out of poverty. To meet this commitment, SPTF will work with MFIs and networks to improve organizations' practice in relation to Section 1, with a technical guide, online resource center, and implementation series webinar trainings. For more information, see www.sptf.info. SPTF commits to continue collaborating with series on the development of Social Performance Indicator, or SPI Task 4, which will serve as a simplified self-assessment tool for MFIs to identify their strengths and weaknesses in social performance management. It is also committed to helping at least 10 MFIs from each region of the world to use this tool to complete self-assessment in the calendar year of 2014. SPI 4, which is set to launch in January 2014, will enable MFI to analyze their social performance management. This will help identify an institution's strength and weaknesses in these areas, helping it to prioritize next steps to improve practice to ensure better service to clients. Once organizations identify areas for improvement, they can use the number of resources available to them to improve practice, including the Universal Standards Technical Guide and online resource center on the SPTF website, joining the TrueLeaf community of practice. SPTF commits to continue working with the Responsible Inclusive Finance Working Group in actions as follows during 2014 to reduce reporting burden and address gaps in technical assistance provision to better facilitate institutions' ability to reach social goals. The group, composed of 7 Responsible Inclusive Finance Initiative, series, MFT, MIX, Principles for Investors in Inclusive Finance, the SMART Campaign, SPTF, and TrueLeaf is collaborating to streamline efforts, avoid duplication, and reduce confusion of the various resources and tools available to practitioners who want to improve their performance. The group's commitment include producing a common data collection tool and data exchange platform to streamline data reporting for MFIs, as well as conducting industry mapping of technical assistance providers. These efforts will contribute to the campaign's goal by reducing the reporting burden for MFIs and addressing gaps in technical assistance, both of which will strengthen institutions' ability to efficiently and effectively execute their social goals. We look forward to tracking and reporting our progress against these goals, as well as working with those who commit to lifting 100 million citizens out of severe poverty. In behalf of Lorafus, this is the commitment of the Social Performance Task Force. Thank you for the honor of reading this in the summit.
Thank you very much, Mila. Mila just gave an example of something we're going to be asking all of you to consider here, which is, if we're looking at this goal of ending severe poverty, if we as a group have set a goal of seeing 100 million people move out of severe poverty, what is your organization, what is your part in making that come about? And there are 2 types of commitments you can make. One is in the area of measuring poverty. I find it's very important, if you're going to reach very poor people, you have to know what levels of poverty you're serving. And so Mila just gave an example of the Social Performance Task Force taking the lead in providing tools for all of us in social performance management and working with others, collaborating in a way that makes it easier for all of us to start reporting information on social performance. There are many ways to think about the commitments you make. There's a commitments help desk out there if you want to think about what your organization is doing and how you can state that as a commitment that you are making to this 100 million goal. There's also a commitment wall out there. You may have seen it. It says, I commit ... to end poverty. And you can write down there what you're going to do personally or what your organization is going to do. There are pens there. You can write it down just to say, this is my part in this movement to end poverty. Newman, you can write down about public-poor partnerships. Put that up there so we all can see what you're doing. So this is a way that we begin to learn what each other's doing and how we can support each other in this work. Just a note now on the schedule. As you know, we're behind by about an hour, so everything is going to be starting about an hour later, but we'll have a break right now for 15 minutes. Then at 3:45, we start the next plenary. There'll be another break at 5:15, and then the workshops will go from 5:30 to 7 p.m. In the workshops, in each workshop session, there's what we're calling a guided discussion. That is, if you want to go deeper on a topic that we had in the plenary, then you can go to this discussion and talk more about it and think about what we can do as an industry to promote the things we talked about here in the plenary session. So Nick spoke about, there'll be a guided discussion on partnerships. So if you want to learn more about how to create partnerships, some of the questions that didn't get answered, or some of those about specifics about how to do partnerships. So go to that session during the workshop time at 5:30. There will also be a guided discussion on national policy, which is our next plenary that comes up in 15 minutes. So that's what we're going to be doing for the rest of the day. At the end of the day, there's a welcome reception after the last workshop that you won't want to miss. So, great to be with you. Thank you to the panel for an excellent job getting us back on time or close to it, and for leading us through this topic of how do we do partnership and giving us great examples of organizations that are working as partners with many of the people in this room. So let's thank the panel for an excellent job. Have a good, quick break.